What happens when one of the most talked about figures in modern celebrity culture sits down with one of television's most fearless hosts and decides that the rules of civil conversation no longer apply? In just 31 seconds, a single dismissive comment would ignite a confrontation so intense that security would be called to the stage. The studio audience settled into their seats, the familiar theme music faded out, and the cameras focused on Bill Maher as he walked onto the stage with his characteristic confident stride. The applause was thunderous. This was his domain, his show, and everyone knew it. Tonight's guest was supposed to be a ratings goldmine. Meghan Markle, a name that had dominated headlines for years, was sitting across from him in the guest chair, already wearing an expression that suggested she had somewhere more important to be. Bill started with his usual welcoming smile. "So, great to have you here. I know you've been pretty selective about your interviews lately." Meghan adjusted herself in the seat, crossing her legs with deliberate slowness. "Well, I only go where I feel the conversation will be intelligent and worthwhile." The audience laughed, assuming it was playful banter. Bill's smile tightened just slightly at the edges. "Fair enough. Let's start with something everyone's curious about. You've spoken a lot about privacy over the years, but you're also constantly in the public eye by choice. How do you reconcile that?" Meghan's jaw tensed. "I think that's a very reductive way to frame it, Bill. When you're a person of influence, when you have a platform like mine, you have a responsibility to use it. That's not the same as seeking attention." "Right, but you do Netflix deals, podcast deals, interviews like this one," Bill countered, keeping his tone light but pointed. "That's not exactly living a quiet life in the countryside. Are you really going to sit there and lecture me about taking opportunities?" Meghan shot back, her voice rising slightly. "You've made a career out of talking about other people. At least I'm trying to make a difference." The audience went quiet. This wasn't the playful back and forth they were used to on the show. This had an edge to it, something sharp and real. Bill leaned back in his chair, still maintaining his composure. "I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm asking a question that I think a lot of people wonder about. You can't claim you want privacy and then constantly put yourself in the spotlight. That's having it both ways. Maybe if people like you didn't constantly twist everything I say and do, I wouldn't have to keep correcting the record," Meghan said, her eyes flashing with anger now. "You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes about people's lives, and you think that gives you some kind of moral authority?" Bill raised his eyebrows. "I think what gives me authority is that this is my show, and I'm allowed to ask tough questions. That's kind of the point." "Tough questions," Meghan repeated with a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it just sounds like the same tired narrative that the tabloids have been pushing for years." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Crew members exchanged glances. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to react. Bill kept his cool, but there was a firmness in his voice now. "Look, I'm not a tabloid. I'm a political commentator. And when public figures make political statements, which you do, they're fair game for discussion." "Everything I do gets scrutinized," Meghan said, her voice getting louder. "Every single thing. And people like you profit from it. You profit from tearing people down." "I profit from having conversations," Bill corrected. "And if you didn't want to have this conversation, you didn't have to come on the show." Meghan stood up abruptly, and the audience gasped. "Maybe I shouldn't have. Clearly, this was a mistake." Bill remained seated, his expression unreadable. "If you want to leave, that's your choice. But don't pretend this is because I'm being unfair. I've asked you completely reasonable questions." "Reasonable?" Meghan's voice was sharp enough to cut. "You've been condescending since the moment I sat down. You've made assumptions about my motives, about my character, and you're hiding behind this persona of being the tough but fair interviewer." "I'm not hiding behind anything," Bill said evenly. "I'm doing my job. And part of that job is not letting people get away with contradictions. You want sympathy for being in the public eye, but you also want the perks that come with celebrity. You can't have it both ways. Meghan pointed a finger at him, her hand trembling slightly with anger. You don't know anything about what I've been through. You don't know what it's like to have every aspect of your life dissected and criticized, to have people question your integrity, your honesty, your intentions, and now you're doing the same thing. Bill finally stood up, matching her energy, but keeping his voice calm. I know what it's like to be criticized. I've been doing this for decades. The difference is, I don't go around complaining about it and then continuing to put myself in the spotlight. That's because you're a man, Meghan said, her voice dripping with accusation. You get to have opinions. You get to be controversial. But when a woman, especially a woman of color, speaks her truth, she's seen as difficult, as problematic, as someone who needs to be put in her place. The audience stirred uncomfortably. Bill shook his head. That's a cop-out, and you know it. This has nothing to do with gender or race. This has to do with you not being able to handle basic questions about your very public life choices. Basic questions? Meghan's laugh was harsh. You're trying to trap me. You're trying to make me look bad. I'm trying to have a conversation, Bill said, his patience clearly wearing thin now. But every time I ask you something, you deflect. You play the victim. You make it about everything except the actual question. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. I don't have to sit here and be attacked. Nobody's attacking you, Bill said firmly. But if you can't handle a challenging interview, then maybe you should stick to the friendly press that lobs you softball questions and lets you say whatever you want without pushback. You are so unbelievably arrogant, Meghan said, her face flushed. You think because you've been on television for years that you can talk to anyone however you want, that you can belittle them, dismiss them, mock them. I haven't mocked you once, Bill said, his voice rising for the first time. I've asked you direct questions, and you've responded with hostility and defensiveness. That's on you, not me. Meghan took a step toward him, and for a moment, it looked like she might actually try to physically confront him. Security personnel at the edge of the stage shifted their weight, ready to intervene. You invited me here to humiliate me. That's what this was always about. I invited you here to have a discussion, Bill said, standing his ground. If you feel humiliated, that's because you can't defend your own positions. That's not my problem. Everything is always someone else's fault with you people, Meghan said, her voice shaking. You never take responsibility for the harm you cause. Bill crossed his arms. You people? What's that supposed to mean? Meghan's eyes blazed. Media personalities who think they're so clever, so important. You're all the same. You tear people apart for entertainment. And you use victimhood as a shield, Bill fired back. Every time someone questions you, you hide behind claims of being attacked. It's manipulation, plain and simple. The audience was dead silent now, watching what had become a full-scale argument. Meghan's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. I came here in good faith. I thought we could have a real conversation. Then have one, Bill challenged. Stop deflecting. Stop playing games. Actually answer a question without turning it into an attack on me or the media or society. I don't owe you anything, Meghan said coldly. And I certainly don't owe you the performance you're clearly looking for. You owe the audience honesty, Bill countered. They came here to see a genuine conversation, not a PR spin session. Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Honesty? From you? That's rich. You make a living being cynical and cruel, and you want to lecture me about honesty? I make a living telling the truth as I see it, Bill said. And the truth is, you want all the benefits of fame without any of the scrutiny. That's not how it works. You don't get to decide how it works for me, Meghan snapped. You don't get to set the rules for my life. I'm not trying to, Bill said, exasperation creeping into his voice. I'm just trying to have a conversation, but you're making that impossible. Meghan grabbed her jacket from the back of the chair. I'm done here. This was clearly a setup from the beginning. It wasn't a setup, Bill said flatly. It was an interview, and you couldn't handle it. No, Meghan said, her voice shaking with rage now. You couldn't handle that I wasn't going to play along with your little game. You wanted me to be meek and grateful for the opportunity to be on your show. Well, I'm not grateful, and I'm not meek. Nobody asked you to be meek, Bill said. But a little humility wouldn't kill you. Meghan's face contorted with anger. Humility? From you? The man who insults people for a living? You want to talk to me about humility? Bill spread his hands. I insult ideas. I challenge people. That's different from what you're doing, which is making this personal because you can't handle the substance. Everything you've said tonight has been personal, Meghan accused. Every single question has been designed to make me look bad. Every single question has been designed to get a straight answer, Bill corrected, which you still haven't given. Meghan turned toward the exit, then spun back around to face him one more time. You know what your problem is, Bill. You think being cynical makes you smart. You think tearing people down makes you insightful. But really, you're just bitter. Bill smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And you're just entitled. You think the world owes you something because of what you've been through. But we've all been through things. Most of us just don't use it as an excuse. This conversation is over, Meghan declared, starting to walk away. It's been over, Bill called after her. You never wanted to have it in the first place. Meghan stopped at the edge of the stage and turned one final time. Her voice was ice cold. I hope you're proud of yourself. I am, actually, Bill said. I asked fair questions. You're the one who couldn't keep it together. Meghan looked at the audience, as if appealing to them for support. You all saw this, right? You saw how he treated me? The audience remained silent, unsure of what to say or do. Bill addressed them directly. What they saw was someone who came on this show expecting softballs and got upset when they got real questions instead. Meghan's voice dropped to a harsh whisper that the microphones barely picked up. You're pathetic. Bill's expression hardened. And you're out of chances. If you want to leave, leave. But don't expect an apology from me for doing what I do every single week on this show. I wouldn't expect anything decent from you, Meghan said, her voice venomous. Bill gestured toward the exit. Then go. Nobody's stopping you. Meghan stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then she pulled off her microphone with enough force that the pack clattered to the floor, turned on her heel, and stormed off the stage. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the silent studio. Bill stood there, watching her go, his expression unreadable. The camera stayed on him as he slowly walked back to his desk and sat down. He looked directly into the camera, his face serious. Well, that was something. I guess some people can dish it out, but can't take it. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the audience. We'll be right back after this break, assuming we still have a show. The audience finally erupted, some in shocked laughter, some in nervous applause, some in complete silence. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled. Security followed Meghan out of the building as she shouted at staff members who tried to calm her down. Inside the studio, Bill sat at his desk, completely calm, flipping through his notes as if nothing unusual had happened. The red light on the camera blinked off as they cut to commercial, and the studio descended into chaos as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The confrontation had lasted less than 15 minutes, but it had felt like an eternity. What was supposed to be a promotional interview had turned into a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral out of control when two strong personalities refuse to back down. Bill had maintained his composure throughout, asking the same kinds of probing questions he always asked his guests, but Meghan had arrived with her defenses up, ready to interpret every question as an attack, every challenge as a personal insult. When the show came back from commercial, Bill addressed the audience one more time. Look, I invite people onto this show to have real conversations. Not fake ones. Not PR-approved ones. Real ones. And sometimes those conversations get uncomfortable. If that bothers you, well, there are plenty of other shows where everyone just agrees with each other and nothing interesting ever gets said. He shuffled his papers and looked into the camera. But that's not this show, and it never will be. The audience applauded, longer and louder than before. They had come for entertainment, and they had certainly gotten it, just not in the way anyone had expected. The video of the confrontation would be dissected and analyzed, but in that moment, in the studio, there was a strange sense of respect for Bill's unwillingness to change his approach, even in the face of extreme hostility. He had done nothing wrong except refuse to treat his guest with kid gloves, and for that, he had been called arrogant, pathetic, bitter, and cruel. But he had also stood his ground, maintained his principles, and kept his show running exactly the way he always had. In a world where so many people bend over backwards to avoid conflict or controversy, there was something refreshing about watching someone simply refuse to play that game. The rest of the show continued without incident, though the energy in the room had fundamentally shifted. Everyone there knew they had witnessed something rare, something that would be talked about for a long time. A moment where all pretense had been stripped away and two people had said exactly what they thought of each other. Consequences be damned. Bill closed out the show with his typical monologue, touching on the night's events only briefly. If you can't take the heat, stay out of the kitchen, or, in this case, stay off the talk show circuit. Good night, everybody. The credits rolled over footage of the studio audience still buzzing with excitement, still processing what they had seen. Bill walked off the stage, waving casually, looking completely unbothered by the evening's drama. Behind him, the empty guest chair sat as a reminder of the person who had occupied it so briefly and so explosively before making her dramatic exit.